Hi world, 27th September 2022, about 8 a.m. in the morning. This is an update on the horoscope of that nice Mr. Vladimir Putin. Many of you will have seen the interview he gave a week ago on national television, which was broadcast all over the world, about how he's defending his motherland, announcing reconscription, and talking about the threat to Russia of the Western world who are threatening to use nuclear bombs against Russia. This is what Putin said. I paraphrase. What struck me was his appearance and his tone, not so much the content of his words, but the way his delivery during the interview. And he did look very almost deranged. He looked as if he was on severe medication or out of control in some way. He did not come across as stable, rational, sane. So I thought, okay, well, let's have another look at his chart, because I've looked at his chart on YouTube 2 or 3 times in this last year, but now we're getting to the business end of the year. In his progress chart, he's got the sun at 24 Sagittarius and the moon at 13 Sagittarius, suggesting that in about 10 to 11 months' time, the progressed moon and progressed sun will come together and there'll be a whole fresh start and a new beginning for him. So whatever he's doing in 11 months' time, he's got a relaunch. If I were talking to a client about this, I'd be saying this is a really good opportunity for a fresh start and a new beginning. I note that Pluto isn't touching his chart, but next year Neptune will be squaring his is already squaring his progressed sun, will continue into next year, and Neptune will be squaring his Mars next year. So that tells me that Putin's Mars is healthy enough. So normally I'd be a bit cautious with Neptune squaring Mars around vitality and health issues. In his chart, less so. This is not the significator I'm looking at. Next year, Uranus in the sky will pass on Putin's Jupiter. Jupiter is a major role player in his chart, squaring his midheaven Pluto node in Taurus retrograde in the 7th house of relationships. With Uranus on top of this, his relationships with other people at the one-to-one level, and I include in this as because he's the head of state, his relationships with other countries are going to go through radical changes. Jupiter in Putin's horoscope rules this is 2nd house of finances, so I imagine that next year, if he's still in power by May, June of next year, I'm not holding my breath on this, but I imagine that his finances will be targeted even more, and I would expect a financial challenge or downturn for him as we get into the middle of next year. But all of this is about next year. It's now I'm looking at. Putin he's a Libra with Scorpio rising. He's got a crazy moon in Gemini. Completely unaspected, completely void. The void, that's not void, it's unaspected. And that means that with the moon in Gemini in the 7th house of relationships, completely unaspected, that his relationships with other people or nations at the one-to-one level are unfettered, uninfluenced, uncontrolled. It's random, it's spontaneous, and the moon in Gemini is not the strongest place for the moon. And when you're a Libra with the Sun conjunct Saturn in the 12th house and Mercury conjunct Neptune in the 12th house, it can lead to fantasies, delusions of paranoia, feelings of inadequacy. Vladimir Putin was also born with Pluto pretty much exactly on top of the midheaven in Leo, opposite the North Node on the nadir of his chart. And when you think that Pluto rules Scorpio, which is his ascendant, Pluto on the midheaven is the might makes right aspect. It's the idea of him being the saviour of his nation, Ivan the Terrible, someone who will lead his country to greatness and transform his country through his own determination and willpower. And in the past that might have worked. But over this last 7 or 8 months, 6 or 7 months, Saturn in the sky has been on his North Node, opposite his midheaven, opposite his Pluto, square his Jupiter. This is still going on, and it's all coming to some type of culmination in the coming few months, between now and mid-late December. So from an astrological perspective, I feel that his days as in his current role are numbered. The conscription in Russia is being strongly resisted, in some cases violently. It seems as if he is losing the support of large elements of the population. And I also suggest that if he's starting to worrying about using nuclear weapons, that so-called sane heads in the people behind him are going to be looking and thinking, whoa, we've got to do something here, because we do not want any type of large-scale escalation of this any worse than it's got. I personally would still be very surprised to see Vladimir Putin in power come the new year. He may go off to his Dasha on the Black Sea and do a kind of Gorbachev and just retreat from public view for a time. But it feels like both he and his defence minister are becoming more and more isolated. Less and less people around them left to blame. And I think that, I don't know Saturn, but Saturn's influence, when you work with astrology for decades and decades, you recognise that Saturn, it can be immutable. And if you work with Saturn and play by its rules, it's a great beneficiary, it's a great teacher, it brings success. But if you try and force it, it doesn't negotiate. And with Saturn opposite Putin's midheaven and Pluto before the end of December, and on his node and squaring his Jupiter, I can't help feel that his days are numbered. But sometimes you need to be careful for what you wish for. Sometimes it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. I can't help but feel that Russia's heading into an economic downturn, massive downturn and turmoil. And I know that so many countries are trying to divest themselves of Russian influence at an economic level. I suggest this is only going to continue in the next few months, but I do expect a sudden change of events towards the end of this year. Catch you later. Oh, on that note, one last thing. I'm just going to do a set of videos now, the first of a large number of videos, and the first one that come out of the box actually concerns Putin. Check the next video, folks.